You know, atheism is nothing new. Atheism is atheo, which means no God. That's what agnosticism means, agnosis, which means I don't know. Atheism says I don't believe there's a God. And apparently atheism is having a new trend in America, or at least several books would seem to say so. They've hit the bestseller list by preaching that faith is harmful. Well, CBN News anchor Lee Webb looks at America's new atheists.
Call it atheism on the offensive. The past few years have seen a surge of interest in unbelief. Books on atheism have topped bestseller lists. They include The End of Faith by Sam Harris, The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, and God is Not Great: How Religion Poisons Everything by Christopher Hitchens.
A lot of respectable people are coming out and saying that they are very happy to dispel the myths of the Bible.
An atheist convention in Washington this summer was sold out and had a waiting list of 600 people. Congress now has a self-proclaimed atheist, and there are atheist summer camps for kids.
Over the last 20 years, the number of people willing to tell people on surveys that they don't believe in God has pretty much doubled.
Some believe atheism has grown because of 9/11 and Islamic terrorists killing innocent people in the name of religion. Some say it's because a generation has come of age that was indoctrinated into secular thought in public schools and universities. But the new atheism isn't content to simply defend unbelief. It attacks religion as a major source of evil in the world. Atheists are still a tiny minority in the U.S., and a University of Minnesota poll last year found that atheists were among the most distrusted group in America. But book sales alone would suggest that interest in atheism has grown dramatically.
We're good people, we're just not God people.
Well, Dinesh D'Souza is a very thoughtful writer, and he's written a new book that answers the claims of these atheists. It's called, quotes, What's So Great About Christianity? And Dinesh, nice to have you back on the 700 Club. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be on the show.
How's your book going? What's so great about Christianity?
It's off to a good start. This is its second week on the New York Times bestseller list. I'm very eager to counter the influence of the new atheists, and particularly to give Christians a kind of handbook for how to prepare themselves and also their children, who are bound as they go off to school and college and so on to be assaulted with the ideas of the new atheists. So the general goal here, Pat, I think, is to make Christians feel foolish for believing in Christianity. What
are the basic claims? I know you've knocked them down, 1, 2, 3, but give me a couple of the salient.
Well, I think
claims.
the new atheism marches behind two banners. On the one hand, it says that religion is inconsistent with reason and science. It makes the argument that religion is based on faith, and the atheists always say blind faith. And then because religion is supposedly based on faith, it leads to fanaticism. So the atheists will say, for example, that religion is behind much of the crimes and terrorism and violence and wars. They point to 9/11. They point to the conflicts around the world in the name of religion. They also will point to the Crusades, the Inquisition, the religious wars, the Salem witch trials. They say, look, the world would be a lot better off if God was not a part of it.
Well, you take those specific things head on, and then you point to how many tens and tens of millions of people have been killed and butchered by atheists. Talk about that.
Well, what's interesting is that the atheists cry sort of crocodile tears about the crimes of religion, very often crimes that go back 500 or 1,000 years ago. If you look at the Inquisition, for example, there's a whole body of scholarship on the Inquisition, and it shows that the Spanish Inquisition, over a period of some 350 years, killed about 2,000 people. Now, I think we'd agree that that's 2,000 too many, but it's a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the crimes of atheist regimes, which occurred not in ancient times, but in our lifetime, in the last century. You mentioned Mao in China, there's Stalin in Russia, but you can add Ceausescu and Pol Pot and Enver Hoxha. It's still going on with Fidel Castro in Cuba, with Kim Jong-il in North Korea. So while the crimes of Christianity are, in a sense, you may say, the debris of the past, the crimes of atheism are still very much with us.
And those crimes, we're talking, again, about tens of millions. I suppose 50, 60 million perished under Mao Zedong and 40 or 50 million under Joseph Stalin and the communists.
Well, Dostoevsky says in The Brothers Karamazov, if God does not exist, everything is permitted. And in some ways you can see that in ancient times, even the most mean-spirited inquisitor was somewhat held back by the idea that I'm going to have to face a last judgment. But when you remove the idea of God, there's nothing to hold you back except your own power and your own will. And this is why I think we've seen these terrible catastrophes, oceans of blood and mountains of bodies.
Well, you also discussed the proof, if you will, of Christianity, the existence of God, and what is the best evidence?
Well, I think it's important to notice, for example, that the atheists always march behind the banner of science, and what they forget is that modern science developed in Western civilization which is the product of Athens on the one hand, but also Jerusalem, and Jerusalem refers to Judaism and Christianity. If you look at the great scientists of the past 500 years, from Kepler to Galileo to Newton to Mendel to Maxwell, the vast majority of them were believing Christians. So this idea of a war between science and religion, I think, is part of the atheist propaganda to make Christians, and especially smart Christians, feel that if you want to be scientific, that somehow sets you up against belief.
Well, actually, all modern science is based on the fact that there are certain laws in the universe, and if you find those laws and work in accordance with them, you can come up with interesting discoveries. It isn't a random universe as if there was no order to it.
Well, what's interesting is that there's incredible intelligence embodied in the laws of nature, and it's taken our brightest scientists from Kepler to Newton to to Einstein to excavate, if you may, the intelligence out of nature. So if scientists are decoding the intelligence in nature, who encoded it? Who put it there? So atheism, I think, in a strange way, has difficulty accounting for the world and for our place in it.
What about the Big Bang? We've had many cosmogonies, but this seems to be the one that's in current vogue, is the concept that everything's had a start from a massive explosion. How do they handle that one?
Well, one of the points I make in What's So Great About Christianity is that it seemed for a couple of hundred years that science was cutting a little bit against religion, particularly with Darwin and the idea that you can have design without a designer. But in the last 100 years, I think there have been spectacular developments in modern science that support theism. One of them is the idea that the universe had a beginning, and what's startling about that is that not only did matter have a beginning, but space and time had a beginning. So this idea of God existing outside of space and time and sort of creating a universe and creating time with it, creating, in fact, the laws of nature as well. This idea has now been affirmed by the findings of modern physics and modern astronomy.
They like to say it's the twilight of Christianity, but you maintain it's the twilight of atheism. Is that right?
In some ways, we're seeing an atheist boom, but the atheist boom is slightly illusory. I think in some ways the atheists are responding to a religious boom. The atheists were sitting back for a long time thinking that, as the world becomes more modern and more technological and more educated, it would become less religious. But this has not happened. We've seen a religious revival around the world. It's happening really with all the major religions, but Christianity is the fastest growing religion in the world. Many people don't know that. So I think that the new atheism can be seen as a kind of backlash against that, but I also think that we should take it seriously because the atheists are ensconced in the universities, they're ensconced in the media, and we should prepare ourselves and our children to counter the new atheism and counter it not just with Bible quotes, but with reason and science and evidence, many of the tools used by the new atheists.
Well, Dinesh, thank you very much. This book, ladies and gentlemen, What's So Great About Christianity? It's on the New York Times best-selling list. It's published by Regnery, and it can be obtained in your local bookstore. So, or on Amazon. It's What's So Great About Christianity. I think you'll find it very interesting and something to give your children, maybe a gift for Christmas.